took that job with Paul, and he's one of my favourite DOs who I've ever worked with. Just so kind. And, I was quite young at the time, never been to the Great Sandy Desert. I'd been to Antarctica, but the Great Sandy Desert's like a whole nother frontier,
That's awesome,
I was like, in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours drive from
anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere.
Hi, and welcome to Wonder, the Planet Earth podcast for curious people. I'm Holly Cook, joined as always by fellow Earth scientist Dr. Anthony Reid. And today in studio, live from Perth, West Australia, we have Heidi Allen. Heidi is a paleontologist with the Geological Survey of Western Australia. And I hope that Heidi is going to take us on a really spectacular journey of ancient life in Australia. So Heidi, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. Really excited.
Fantastic. Thanks, Heidi. Hey, so there's a really famous place in Western Australia. Western Australia is a big place. People who are not from there don't really necessarily get just how big this place is. But there's a part of Western Australia called Shark Bay. It's very famous. One of the most famous reasons why one of the most important reasons why it's famous, I should say, is because you can go there and meet dolphins. There are dolphins that will come up close in a place called Monkey Mia, right? And most people go there for the dolphins. But what they miss sometimes, is a little pool that you can see just off to the side of the road, a place called Hamlin's Pool. And when you go there, you can see a very amazing thing. Heidi, please can you tell us, why is Hamlin's Pool near Shark Bay such a special place?
Yes, definitely I can. So I didn't even know there were dolphins in Shark Bay.
Oh, you've never been there?
Is it famous for dolphins? No.
That's the best paleo response I've heard.
I'm joking. I have been to Monkey Mia, but I think the dolphins are overrated. You can see dolphins in Mandurah.
That is so true.
All right, but what can't you see in Mandurah?
Controversial opinions already. I love it.
Shark Bay is world renowned for its amazing stromatolites growing there. So we're really lucky in WA that we have a large number of extraordinary sites actually, but Shark Bay is one of the most famous of those, where we have living microbialites. So the word stromatolite is an umbrella. It comes under the umbrella of microbialites, and these are very ancient structures that actually we have the oldest evidence of life on Earth here in Western Australia are these fossil microbialites. So the fact that we have these living in Shark Bay today is really special for our state and our country. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site for its scientific value, and it's a great place where people can go and see living stromatolites.
Wow. So did you just say some of the oldest life on Earth? So like we have,
yes.
but they're living today? What do you mean?
Yes. So these wonderful fossils or living structures actually have a fossil record that stretches back almost 3.5 billion years, 3.7 controversially, but 3.5, well accepted.
That's
fossil record.
3.5.
Yeah.
I actually don't think I had clocked before really entering this science that life stretched back that far.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but can you just clarify, when we go to Shark Bay, we see these stromatolites, these sort of features. They are not those particular ones are not 3.7 or 3.5 billion years old, are they? Right.
That's right. They're a few thousand years old.
Yep.
But what's special about them is that they're a living analogue for the fossils that we have that exist 3.5 billion years ago and at every age in between. So they have the longest record of any life living on Earth. And in fact, they're also looking for this type of fossil life elsewhere in the in the solar system. So the exploration for life on Mars is really largely focused on looking for fossil microbialites, because we know conditions on Earth and Mars 3.5 billion years ago were very similar.
Wow.
So, they're really special for a number of reasons. I think there's only a handful of places in the world where you can see these things growing today, and Shark Bay is a really wonderful example of that. But we're also lucky enough in WA to have some lesser known sites that are also spectacular. So we have the wonderful Lake Clifton, which is just south of Perth. That's only an hour south of Perth. And there we have living thrombolites. So they're slightly different. They have an internal structure that's clotted rather than layered, but they're a form of microbialite as well. And we also have some smaller some smaller living structures at Lake Thetis, which is just near the Pinnacles, north of Perth. So yeah, we have living microbialites in a number of places, but Shark Bay is one of the most famous sites we have, and it's a really extensive area of stromatolites there around Hamlin Pool. So the reason that they exist there is that Hamlin Pool has a very restricted environment. It's the kind of place that is quite hostile to most other life. So it's a place where these slow growing stromatolites can actually still have substrate. So elsewhere, where we have coral reefs and things growing, then these microbialites are outcompeted for space. But Hamlin Pool has a seagrass there's a seagrass sort of sill that stops the water flow from open ocean into Hamlin Pool there. So it's hypersaline, it's very salty, and it's the perfect conditions for these stromatolites.
Oh my gosh. This is unbelievably cool.
Good, Heidi. Okay.
Right. So many questions.
There's also sea snakes there, so I would discourage you from taking your snorkel set. I associate Shark Bay with stromatolites and sea snakes, not dolphins, but maybe I'm not normal.
do we,
Definitely normal in this company, don't worry.
Do you think, I think we should maybe just very quickly, we don't have to get too far into it, but like, what do we even mean by stromatolite? So we've got all these words: stromatolite, thrombolite, microbialite, hydrolite.
Yeah, so microbialite. So microbialite is the blanket term, if you like, for all these different structures.
Okay.
We have stromatolites, we have thrombolites, we have other things that are lesser known. We have some things with layolites. And so basically a microbialite is a structure that's accreted by a community of microbes. So where there's a community of microbes living on a seafloor or a lake bottom, so sort of like a little blanket of slime, if you like. And what happens over time, there's two ways these structures can accrete. Either we have sediment coming into the water column, it's raining down onto these blankets of slime and the sediment becomes stuck, and over time that sort of accretes into layers and the microbes will migrate out to the living edge of that structure, and over long periods of time you can get accretion of a structure. The other way is that this blanket of slime will form a locus of precipitation. So minerals will precipitate, and again, the microbes will then migrate to the outer living edge of the structure, and over time, these structures will accrete. So they're very slow growing. A few millimeters a year is sort of like a good growth rate for microbialites. And yeah, so it can either be from the raining in of sediment and the trapping and binding, or from the precipitation of minerals. But in most microbialites, both of those processes are happening. So over time, in a stromatolite, over time you get a laminated structure, so they're layered. So we get, if you cut it through the middle, you'll see a stripy macrostructure. Thrombolites, which are another pretty common type of microbialite, they have a clotted structure.
Right, and because I'm truly mean no offense by this, but it would appear that like when I've seen stromatolites out in nature, if it can just look like a rock. Like I'm trying to picture if someone's not seen a stromatolite, and I don't mean just a rock, a brilliant rock,
but
it
still
kind of
just
is
a rock.
Just a rock. But like
it can be a little underwhelming, and I think you do have to visit with someone who really appreciates how amazing these structures are. And Holly, I invite you when you're here in Perth. I'll take you to Lake Clifton. I'll be your tour guide. I get very excited by these things. I like to think of the microbes as tiny but mighty, because actually, they can make these enormous structures. So in the fossil record. So they're at Shark Bay, I think, they're about 1 meter maximum height. But in the fossil record, they can be tens of meters high and wide, even hundreds of meters. It's pretty amazing what life was able to do in terms of, forming these structures before we had more complex life. So most people think of paleontologists as working on dinosaurs, or, Australia is quite famous for the Ediacaran biota. So I think people are pretty good about understanding that dawn of life, and that we do have, beautiful, quite young, relatively complex animal fossils. But what I think is amazing about microbialites is this really old and ancient archive of life on Earth that we have, and the structures are beautiful. I mean, in the modern day, those ones at Shark Bay and Lake Clifton, that look, I think they're beautiful, and I appreciate visiting those sites because of how significant they are for understanding the rock record. But I think what people who don't work on fossil stromatolites maybe don't appreciate is the diversity and range of microbialites that we have in the fossil record. It's not like what we can see today. So back in the Proterozoic, we have the most amazing microbialites, like beautiful cone structures, shapes like an upside down ice cream cone, 10 meters wide,
wow,
with branches coming off them. We have really complex branching patterns that we can't observe in modern day microbialites. There's just it's a whole different ballgame when you're looking at microbialites in the Proterozoic.
And how did that? So these structures almost feel like architecture, right? Like these microbialites have a real architecture to them. What is it? Just because they grow in these sort of mat-like fashion? What controls this architecture of this life?
Yeah, that's such a huge question, and scientifically, we still don't all agree on what actually forms that. I call it a microbialite's preferred architecture, because you definitely do get this environmental overprint. So I can recognize the same microbialite in two different environments. I think there's a lot of different controlling factors of what makes a microbialite. So the environment is certainly one, but the underlying microbiota is also a controlling factor. So, for example, we know conical stromatolites, which are those upside down ice cream cones I was talking about before, they're formed by filamentous microbes. So you get, filamentous microbes on a sea floor or lake bottom, and what happens is they get tangled, and then they'll sort of form a high point. And what happens is the filaments will migrate to that point because they can get energy, and it's good for light and energy exchange there. So you get this over time a formation of an upside down ice cream cone. So we know some types of microbes will preferentially form a type of microbialite, but it's not widely agreed as to what extent the environment plays a role in the final morphology versus the underlying microbiota. But there's also later complicating factors. So, how that structure becomes lithified also will change its morphology, how it's changed over time. So, geologists, we refer to that as diagenesis, and to the everyday person, that just means what's happened to the rock since it became a rock. It can be heated, it can be folded. So there's lots of changes that can happen to microbialites after they've been lithified. So all these factors come into what the final thing is that we're looking in the rock record.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Can we just ask what when you say microbes, so what type of organism are we talking about?
Yeah, it's a whole complex. So we've got bacteria, cyanobacteria, archaea. Viruses play a big role in the lithification of microbialites. So it's a host of all different things in that little community of microbes. Now, what's difficult for paleontologists working on microbialites is that we don't actually have a record of what built the structure. So it's a little bit like a trace fossil in that we just get the structure that was built left behind. It's very rare to actually find microfossils associated with microbialites. We do obviously have wonderful microfossils in the Proterozoic basins and rock record, but we don't. In general, you wouldn't find them associated with stromatolites or microbialites. All you find is the structure they've built that's been left behind. So a lot of the work comes from modern environments and looking at that community of microbes that's building modern structures. But like I alluded to before, the modern structures is only really scratching the surface of the record of microbialites we have in the fossil record. So I think what we don't know is huge.
Yeah. Hey, so if we were to go on a field trip out in Western Australia, you took us to this site where we have the evidence for the oldest microbialites or stromatolites, what would we see?
So they're really cool. Yep. I think the oldest microbialites are very interesting. So we've got the Dresser Formation and we've also got the Strelley Pool Formation. So they're the two sort of, most well-known Archean stromatolite sites from here in Western Australia. They're protected sites, so they're geoheritage reserves. Some of the reference sections, the most significant sites are protected, and you do need to have a permit to visit those sites. But we have, there's a range of microbialites. There's some sort of simple dome structures. There's some that sort of look like columns just coming off a seafloor. We also have beautiful cone structures. So there's a beautiful specimen has been collected and is in the West Australian Museum. It's in the Stromatolite Gallery at Boulevardet that local people can go and visit. And it's colloquially called the egg carton stromatolite because it literally looks like an upside down egg carton. It's got sort of little cone structures there.
Right. And now West Australia is a big place. So whereabouts, is there a road to get there? Is there are we in the middle of the outback? Are we by the coast? Where is this old stuff?
Well, the oldest life sites, the earliest life sites are all near a town called Marble Bar, which is infamous for being the hottest town in Australia, or maybe the world. I don't know. It's very hot.
It's very hot in Marble Bar.
It's very hot.
It's always hot in Marble Bar.
Right.
Beer is cold.
So we have there's a collection of sites sort of in that area there that have beautiful Archean stromatolites. But I would argue some of my favourite ones are slightly younger, and I think the Proterozoic is a great place for looking at microbialites. I really love the diversity in Proterozoic basins, and I think the study of Archean stromatolites is really interesting. A lot of people focus their research on Archean stromatolites because of that analogue for looking for life on Mars, because it's the oldest. But I do think that the Proterozoic has a lot to tell us. And I think that when you step up into the Proterozoic, I think the application of microbialite research is really interesting to me. So, we're looking at a time where there was a lot of resources. We're also looking at a time when life became more complex. So we're getting the evolution of eukaryotes. So we're not just looking at single-celled organisms anymore. We're getting macrofossils. So for the first time, life is becoming large and living on the seafloor and lake bottoms. So I think the Proterozoic basins are often overlooked, and I think that's where I really have some favorite basins, favorite microbialites, and they all come in that little Proterozoic window. I think it's a very interesting time.
Right. I would like to try and time travel with you because, we often talk about how continents come and go, oceans come and go, and we're talking at a time in Earth history where I imagine it would just be almost unimaginable how different it is. What were the land masses doing? What were the oceans doing? But it also needed special conditions to foster something like stromatolite growth. Do you know what I'm trying to say? What did this world look like?
Yeah, I don't so much look at the big picture, to be honest, but I do think there is interesting application for my work in looking at how continents were moving, and definitely tectonic processes is something I'm always mindful of, is that, what am I looking at here? Where are my microbialites? What is the setting of them? So I think the power of microbialites, in my opinion, working at the Geological Survey of Western Australia is their use for correlation. So that is why I'm looking at these fossils all day, every day, is that they're really useful for correlating isolated outcrops of rocks. So I can look at microbialites and tell by a number of their features, not just looking at them sort of as picture matching, but it's quite a complex science. You do have to describe the microbialite from everything from the outcrop right down to the micro scale, but I can identify specific types of microbialites and use them to correlate different packages of rocks. And that has really interesting applications for understanding a lot of those bigger picture things. So sometimes I come up with interpretations that are different to what people have previously looked at. And I find that really exciting. And I think that's one of the great applications of my work, that we can have alternate hypotheses to test with other methods like geochronology. So I think it's a very interesting world. It's very different to anything we had both now or before it. So the Proterozoic is a very changing environment. And I think, I just love standing at an outcrop and trying to imagine, what did this look like?
Yeah,
what did this lake floor look like?
Yeah.
What did this sea bottom look like? Because there's nowhere I can go on Earth today and snorkel over structures like what I can see in the rock record. And that's really cool.
That's awesome. Where would you go if we all held hands and went back to the Proterozoic and we could be flies on the wall? What would you want? What specific environment of these things would you want to go and look at? Which ones would you want to see in the flesh?
That's so hard, because at just every outcrop I see, I just want to picture that in my mind. I do. Well, I think that we have this beautiful. We have some really beautiful stromatolites from the Tumbiana Formation. So they're 2.7 billion years old. And I think that would be a really great place to snorkel, because it is interpreted as a lake.
Okay.
And these microbialites are growing in a lake. They're beautiful stromatolites. I think some of the most spectacular. They're actually the stromatolite that's on the cover of our Chiringa, our Australian Journal of Paleontology, and have been since its inception. So they're quite famous, because at the time they were thought to be the oldest stromatolites. So yeah, that would be quite interesting, I think, to see a lake and to see the different forms of microbialites growing there. But equally, there's some other really beautiful marine examples that I think I'd really love to snorkel over some of these sites and see, what does it look like with the different microbialites, like how are they growing together. So when you go to a modern coral reef, there's so much diversity there that, you know, your eye is drawn to the coral, but I think the more time you spend snorkeling in coral reefs, you get an appreciation for the algae and the different things the sponges and there's so much diversity that's growing that's actually making that complex, ecosystem. And I think we do actually have that in the rock record. But, we're only seeing the bit that's lithified. So I would be interested to see what that looks like. And there's a number of Proterozoic sites where you see different forms of microbialites growing in the same environment. And I find that really exciting, because I think that can help us answer that question as what is driving microbialite morphology. So I get really excited, particularly at outcrops where I can find columnar stromatolites with conical stromatolites with gentle domes, and they're all growing together. I find that really exciting, and I'd love to snorkel that.
No sea snakes back in the Proterozoic either, thankfully.
No. Although we don't know what Horridiscia was, so they could come at you. They're an interesting fossil of little, they're called string of beads. So it just looks like a little pearl necklace. But I assume they were
benign,
just something growing on the seafloor, but you never know.
I know, it all sounds sus to me.
They could missile out at you.
Heidi? What instigated your passion for these features, for these stromatolites?
Well, I think it's maybe just being in the right place at the right time. So I was a student at Macquarie University and working on Paleozoic fossils over there. So as a student and a young geo, I'd only ever been exposed to very young rocks and young fossils. My husband and I both did back-to-back Antarctic seasons, came back to Sydney, regrouped. He wasn't my husband at the time. It was just my boyfriend. He's now my husband.
Just a dude.
Yeah, just a dude that I knew back then. And we sort of regrouped in Sydney, and he's a geophysicist, and he said, well, what do you think about me applying for jobs, outside of Sydney? I was like, oh, yeah, okay. And he goes, well, will you come with me? And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe.
Depends where you go.
Find a job, and then I'll see.
Figure it out.
Employment for a paleontologist there. Let's see. So he got offered a job in Perth, and so at the time it was a boom time. There was lots of geo jobs over here in WA, so I thought I would put the feelers out. I'll start applying, and one of the jobs I applied for was at the Geological Survey of Western Australia as a geoscience editor, and I had been working at the New South Wales Geological Survey, another amazing place to work, and so I thought, that was one of 3 jobs I got offered, and at the time I was like, oh, I'd really, could really see myself having a career at a Geological Survey. So I took that job very quickly. I think amongst regional geoscience, people realized I was a paleontologist. I had field skills. So I got invited out onto a number of field programs. And so the first one I went out was with Paul Morris, who was a geochemist here at GSWA. And he came into my office and he said, Heidi, I've heard that you have helicopter experience. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I would really need you to come out to the Western Desert, this great sandy desert, because I need someone who knows how to work around helicopters. And I was like, okay, right. I've hopped into a helicopter and I've hopped out of a helicopter. But yes, I ticked that box, I guess. So I took that job with Paul, and he's one of my favorite DOs who I've ever worked with. Just so kind. And, I was quite young at the time, never been to the Great Sandy Desert. I'd been to Antarctica, but the Great Sandy Desert's like a whole nother frontier,
That's awesome,
I was like in the middle of nowhere, 2 hours drive from
anywhere.
Anywhere. And so he took me out there, and I was the backup. I had to get trained on some very high-tech digital pen for the data sheet, just because I was only ever going to have to use it one day in 7. I was just the relief. And on the second day in, he did his back.
Oh.
Did his back, digging a hole. And so I had to do every day straight for, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks of this helicopter soil sampling program. So that was, it was amazing experience. But I came back, and so I'd had lots of time out there. Really enjoyed my time. Got to work with some wonderful traditional owners. And just really had a nice time in the community. We were staying there in Kuakura and returning every night. So that happened. The following field season, Peter Haynes was starting. So he's the basin custodian at GSWA. He was starting a large scale mapping program on the border there. So we did 1 to 250,000 sheets. And so Pete was going out. He's worked extensively in Neoproterozoic basins around Australia. So he had this project going, and I think at the time our chief geo that was Roger Hocking. He said, "Oh, Heidi Allen has been out there." I was Heidi Calden at the time, but he said, "Oh, Heidi's been out there. She had a great time with the people in Kuakura. Maybe a familiar face would be useful. I think she's got some paleo skills. Maybe you could take her out." So I went out with Pete.
That's so good.
And I had seen in my entire career before that, I reckon you could count on one hand the amount of stromatolites I had seen.
How about that?
Wow.
I don't think anybody really thought, she's a Paleozoic paleontologist. What is she going to do out there? But I was just out there. We did a couple of really long campaigns. I think we did a few 5-week field trips. This was before I had kids. So, really sort of campaign style mapping. So there was really nothing to do except to look at the stromatolites. And,
and you got very good at it.
I just got really excited by them.
And then,
so Peter Haynes was very encouraging, and he obviously knew the power of stroms well before I sort of started to be like, oh, maybe I could map this formation using this stromatolite. He very much directed me, and we had Kath Gray back in the office, so she hadn't quite retired yet, and she's the guru of stromatolites. So I did what I call a very extensive apprenticeship of microbialites over time with Kath. She wasn't up to going out in the field at the time, but I'd make the field observations, make all the take all the samples, bring them back to the office. We do all of the lab work together. And so over time, there was this sort of handover of expertise. And look, the microbialites were really useful in that program. So I think it once again sort of cemented for GSWA what a great tool these amazing fossils are for correlation on the ground. You get real-time answers. So after the second or third field season, I got really good at identifying these, and I didn't need to do as much of the lab work. But, for really well-preserved examples, I could identify them on the ground. And so that becomes a really powerful tool when you're mapping large areas. So I think it was
so good.
that I fell in love with microbialites on that project, and I've only ever just
Heidi.
Expanded from there.
Thanks so much for sharing. I just love the, I heard you had chopper experience, and that's where the love affair started.
So good.
That's excellent. I just think we have so much more to explore with you. But for now, thanks so much for sharing your excitement. I've never been so wound up, ready to go about such little life things. So thanks for coming on the pod.
As soon as you come to WA, I'm taking you out. And Anthony, anytime in the field, I'm very happy to share my love of microbialites on the ground.
Right. Wicked. There we go. Oh, cheers, Heidi. We'll catch you next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.